Hi everyone, I'm Emma. I'm one of Shine's directors.
And I'm Kynwen, Shine's other director. And welcome to Shine Connect, our online conference. This is the 5th time we've run Shine Connect, and it's the first time we've ever run it online.
We're really excited that by doing it online, we've been able to reach a lot more people than would normally be able to make it to London for the day. And we've also scheduled some amazing sessions throughout the week. So starting today and going right the way through until Thursday. There are also some social meetups in there, so come along and have a chat with us. And the best thing to do is to go into your registration, have a look at the full schedule, because there have been things added in the last few days, and then you can add whatever you like to your personalized program.
Two things that we really wanted to highlight about today. First of all, immediately after this introduction, we'll be going into a panel discussion with a number of younger adults with cancer from around the country who will be telling us what life has been like for them over the last year. And at 3 o'clock today, we'll be joined by Professor Sir David Spiegelhalter, who is an expert in the public understanding of science. And he's going to be talking about how we make sense of statistics. What do we do when we see those tricky headlines about things that we should or shouldn't do as cancer patients? And how can we make the best decisions for us?
Great. So we're going to be kicking off with the panel now, as Kynwen said, and we hope to see you over the next few days.
Thanks.
Hi, everyone. I'm Emma, and I'm one of the directors at Shine, and a massive welcome to this Shine's Young Adult Cancer panel at Shine Connect. We've got a great group of people joining us today to talk about what it's like being a young adult with cancer, and also being a young adult with cancer while there's a pandemic going on. We're also joined by Kynwen, who's Shine's other director, so I'll let her introduce herself too.
Hi everyone, I'm Kynwen. Like Emma says, I'm the other director at Shine. We're really excited to have you join us. We had planned to run this conference in May in person, and way back in March we delayed it to November, thinking surely this will be all over by November, but clearly it's not. So we're really excited to do it online and to have you all here. And I think we're just going to get the panel to introduce themselves. So let's start with Bethan.
Hi, so I'm Bethan. I'm 27. I was diagnosed with stage 4 Hodgkin's lymphoma with a 10 centimetre bulky tumour on my chest last September. And I live in Suffolk.
Thanks. Caroline, let's go to you.
Yep. Hi, I'm Caroline and I live in Oxford, and I was diagnosed with a rare form of melanoma when I was 29 in 2017, and I've been living with stage 4 melanoma since the end of 2018.
Thanks for joining us. Jamil.
I'm Jamil. I live in London. I was diagnosed when I was 33 with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and I've been living with it for 5 years, and I got remission just at the start of lockdown.
That must have been fun.
That was fun. That was my reward.
Yeah. Oh, great. Thanks for joining us, Jamil. Amit.
Hi, so my name's Amit. I'm a young 45-year-old. I'm married to Mira. She was diagnosed with a solitary plasmacytoma when our son Rohan was 6 months old back in 2011. And subsequently, she was diagnosed with multiple myeloma in late 2018. It was a nice Christmas present for us. And she had chemotherapy and a stem cell transplant last year.
And Mira was she was one of my first cancer friends.
Yes, she was.
She was the first person I had met who had cancer in a baby as well, which is obviously not something you'd necessarily wish on anyone else, but it was amazing to meet someone else who kind of had the same situation. So thanks for joining us, Amit. And Mike.
Hi, I'm Mike. Down here in Christchurch on the sunny south coast. I am 46 years old, and I was diagnosed in 2016 with myeloma in my spine. Similar experiences there to Amit with chemotherapy and stem cell transplants, and I'm in a remission at the moment, and touch wood, it will continue for a bit longer.
Thanks everyone for introducing yourselves, and thanks for giving up your time to be here today and share your experiences with people. So the first thing we wanted to talk about today is the thing that we probably can't avoid, which is the COVID-19, the pandemic. It kind of had a big impact on everyone's lives this year. So we wanted to talk a bit more about that today and about how it's different if you're living with a cancer diagnosis or caring for somebody who is. So maybe I'll come to Bethan first, if that's okay. Bethan, you finished treatment just in February, and obviously we went into lockdown in March. So how has that been for you, like finishing treatment and moving straight into a pandemic situation?
It was hard, yeah. I think because all the way through treatment, you think, oh, at the end, going to go away and have a spa break or do something nice. And I didn't get to do any of that. And I didn't even get to celebrate finishing treatment. I was told that I was in remission whilst in hospital by someone in full PPE, no visitors. And it was really hard to process that news in that situation. And it wasn't at all kind of how I imagined it to be. But I think going through treatment, you're so vulnerable of infection anyway. You're already shielding, aren't you? And you just kind of carry on that life. And it just feels like that life has continued, really. And I haven't quite seen the end of it yet, even though I am in remission and have been for 9 months now. I still haven't been in a shop or gone for a meal out to celebrate anything. So yeah, it's not been as I imagined it to be. I suppose that's the problem.
Yeah, that sounds really tough. I think it's, you know, whatever people do to kind of celebrate treatment or to see people when they've finished treatment, especially if you've been isolating through that, you know, it must be really difficult to then not be able to get together with people and mark that, or just get that support from your friends and family.
Just to acknowledge something, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mike, you've been shielding in an extreme way at the start of the pandemic, and we've just got into a second lockdown. So, you know, do you want to share a bit about your experiences and what's different?
Yeah, I mean,
this time around?
The first lockdown, I think it was all very new, wasn't it? And there was a lot of fear about catching the infection, and obviously certainly in the press and within our community. And so initially I wasn't entirely sure how I was going to shield, because I have a wife and 2 children, and you know, did I shield with the family all in together, or do I shield on my own? And circumstances really dictated that I had to go and shield on my own. So I spent that period alone in a 1-bedroom flat, and with a pretty poor internet connection as well, to be honest. Which when you're stuck inside for such a long time, actually the internet does become quite crucial, really. So yeah, that was really tough, because although I'm self-sufficient anyway, you know, I can look after myself, cook and you know, do the washing, all that, those sorts of things. But you know, being away from, you know, my wife and family was really tough, and so then that became a mental struggle, because the children would be upset, and they would phone and get upset down the phone and send messages, you know, they missed. And that was one of the very difficult things to cope with, because it was on for weeks and weeks, and then it was kind of open-ended, you know, as well. You know, you weren't sure if it was going to be a couple of months, maybe 3 months. So that's what made it difficult. And I think this time round, things are a bit different, really. Whereas I'm at home, I'm going to stay at home, and it's not as extreme as it was the first time round. And yeah, it's a bit of a risk, because my wife still has to go to work, and the kids will still go to school. But we have some regimes in place which reduces the risk of infection. I took a bunch of advice from my specialist nurse on how to to kind of, risk assess and reduce that possibility. But it's all about being, it has been really right from the start, just about, for me, being sensible and not putting myself or the family not putting themselves in situations where, the risk of infection would be a silly thing to do.
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? Because it's like you said, it's I think when this started, a lot of us kind of thought, oh, it'll be a few months, okay, and everyone can kind of cope with a lockdown maybe if it's a few months, and now it's been 8 months or 7 months, and there's not a real end in sight at the moment. I mean, we're talking about vaccines and all that kind of stuff, but I think it is getting harder because you don't see your friends, you don't see your family in the same way, and it's a long time to have to cope with that kind of stuff. Amit, how's that been for you guys? Because obviously Mira's had a stem cell transplant, like you said.
So we'd already done an element of kind of a small lockdown after she had a stem cell transplant anyway. So we were kind of slightly used to not seeing people for a while. However, this time it's because the supermarket, I think, as we talk, celebrating something that you've just been through from a treatment perspective, and we'd planned 2 or 3 holidays already for this year, of which every single one has had to be cancelled. I started working from home as the beginning of March. Obviously, Mira being from a medical background, she's done all her reading, she's done all her research. So we were ahead of the game in terms of going into that lockdown period. And we even took Rohan out of school a week earlier just by looking at the stats and everything. So no, we've not seen any family. We've not been to anybody else's house. Everything's been online shopping. Everything gets sanitized before it comes into the house itself. And, if you have to go into London, it's done by car. But yeah, life is, in essence, it has stopped. Any socializing is really social distanced. All the exercise, Kyron, you and Emma both know how much exercise I do. That's kind of had to stop in some of those activities and doing things differently. The only difference this time round is that Rohan is back at school. So, from March up until September, all 3 of us were at home. We're fortunate we have a garden, but we made the decision that as of September, he goes into school. As Mike said, we follow a procedure. He doesn't come into the house. He comes in through the side, takes all his clothes off, and then he goes straight into the shower, kind of cleans himself, de-COVIDs, and then he's allowed to go and hug or kiss him, which is really hard from a kid's perspective. And, also being an only child, he's not got to see his grandparents on either side. So it is tough. And it'll be a bit tougher this time around because the weather's not as great as it was in the summer. So I think that makes a big difference as well. It gets darker earlier and so on. So it's tough. It has been tough, but I think we're going to have to continue to see it out for a couple more months at least.
Yeah. It's been interesting, hasn't it, as well, seeing that obviously a lot of our community are in similar situations and have been in, probably a stricter lockdown or shielding compared to the general population, I guess. So it's been interesting to see, like Mike, I was just going to go back to what you said about not having internet. And I think, the internet has been a savior for a lot of us through lockdown. So we've been able to kind of connect with people in different ways. And I wondered if anyone had anything to share about how that's helped, or about what things they've been doing that maybe they didn't do pre-lockdown.
I think, what we're doing now never really happened at all because everything we did was face-to-face. So, but as soon as lockdown happened, the internet became pivotal, I think, because everything had to be done online. And like shopping, contact with people, so to have either a weak Wi-Fi signal, which in my case wouldn't support the Zoom, and then and for those in areas where I don't know, maybe the broadband is inaccessible, that's that's pretty tough. And you know, I think the internet has been one of the best things, really, that that has been there and available. And to think of if it wasn't there and we didn't have this facility, I think things would be much bleaker.
Definitely. And I think one of the things, you know, we talk a lot about, Shine, even in regular times, is how we connect with people, how our relationships with friends and family are, you know, whether they might have changed, because sometimes, you know, it's weird because at the moment we've kind of got COVID on top of a cancer diagnosis, but in regular times, having just cancer is a lot. And I think people's relationships can experience changes, you know, for good and for bad. And, you know, some people step up in amazing ways that you didn't foresee, and you might connect with them in a way that you hadn't expected. I'm just wondering, you know, how you guys have found it. Caroline, how has it been for you? Because you've obviously been shielding for since the beginning of the pandemic as well, right?
Yeah, I've been shielding, and it's kind of, I'm not immunocompromised. So it's more a case of shielding because we just don't know what would happen to me, and I don't want to get ill. And I had a weird virus last December that like came out of nowhere and knocked me out for about 3 or 4 weeks. So having had that experience, I've been a bit more anxious, I think, about COVID and about shielding. And in general, most of my friends have been really good. I feel like I'm evaluating them all now. Yeah, I've had some, like, people have been really helpful. So in the early days of the pandemic, I actually struggled to register as clinically extremely vulnerable. So for some reason, I didn't get picked up, even though the medication I was on the official shielding list. And so I did have friends who would like go and do shopping for me and bring it over, and that was really helpful. But generally, because I look well and I've had treatments that I've basically looked well throughout my entire sort of cancer, hate to say journey, but journey, because I've always looked kind of okay. I think people don't necessarily see me as being a sick person. And so in, you know, sort of in general terms, that could be really great because I can sort of walk around and live a reasonably normal life if I want. But particularly during COVID, when the lockdown eased, I found that quite stressful because, you know, I could see older people walking down the street, and, you know, other people passers by would really give them a wide berth and were, you know, really taking care to maintain distance, but nobody was doing that for me. And so that really kind of heightens my anxiety about going out anywhere. But but I have been lucky that people have been lots of friends have been taking care of me and stuff.
Funny, actually, I mean, I know for myself, but I think for a lot of people, actually, in a weird kind of way, the beginning of lockdown, like from March, when we were locked down, you can't see anyone, you're in your house, that was quite straightforward, right? There was no ambiguity about what you were meant to be doing. And as things started to open up, I think it became more stressful because all of a sudden, different people were doing different things, and you almost had to evaluate, you know, if you wanted to see a person, how well have they stuck to lockdown rules, and what risk might that put you at? And that, I think that whole level of, then it's more uncertainty, isn't it? It's like that level of ambiguity is really difficult. Jamil, what about you? Because you've also had a stem cell transplant and then just got into remission as well. So just in time for COVID.
I'm on immunosuppression as well, so I really can't go outside. And so I've been mostly inside for sort of 9 months, not even really going outside for walks and things like that, mainly because I've been tied to my desk, which I guess I'm fortunate to be working in the current climate. But yeah, I found it very similar to the treatment experience, that level of uncertainty, the level of, you know, I don't panic almost, because at the beginning it wasn't really clear what the rules were, and then they came out with that letter for people who are shielding, and it said you have to box yourself off in a room, and, you know, you can't speak to anyone, you can't see anyone, you can't touch anything, and you're thinking, how is that even a feasible way of living, you know? And in fact, my wife shields with me, and so I didn't have to sleep in a separate bed and all those other things that they were trying to get us to do in their letter. But yeah, I found it really hard. The first probably 6 months were really difficult for me. We had Zoom and you can talk to people, but it's not the same as going to see your mates or going to the office and working and going out for a walk for lunch with your friends or whatever it is that you do. But I sort of turned a corner a few months ago, and I think I accepted it, and I think I sort of signed off 2020 as just done. And 2021, I'll go outside maybe. So we'll see how it goes. Hopefully it will change.
It's an interesting New Year's resolution, isn't it? I will leave the house this year. I don't think anyone expected that in January this year, right? But
no, but I think Jamil made a really good point in the sense of, like you, I've been fortunate that I can work from home and I don't need to step into offices, and all our offices are closed. But you miss that social interaction of when you're sat around people and you can just turn to someone and have that conversation.
Yeah.
That time that you have to yourself when you're traveling into work or traveling home is the time to process your thoughts and do everything else. Whereas when you're stuck at home, that's it, right? I can't just turn around and have a conversation to anyone. And, some of us are fortunate that I can shut this door once I finish for the day for work, and I can go to the rest of the house. A lot of people don't have that opportunity, that situation to do that, because they're working from the kitchen table or working from their bedroom, which makes it even more difficult during lockdown.
I think it was sorry, Jamil, you go.
Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, this we could edit this bit out too. I was going to say that I thought it was really, you made a good point about being, getting a letter saying you're clinically extremely vulnerable, because I eventually did get a letter, and it just felt horrible because even though I have incurable cancer, I've never felt vulnerable.
Yeah.
I felt vulnerable on occasion, but I've never had somebody stamp me and say you are clinically extremely vulnerable. You need to take special care. And it's really horrible. And then again, the language around shielding and things, like shielding in itself is so militaristic. And I think I heard, it might have been Northern Ireland, they talked about cocooning people who needed protection. And I thought, if someone had told me to cocoon for 6 months, I would have been ready to go, like have a heated blanket. I'd be down with that. But yeah, saying shielding and, an extreme, it just wasn't very reassuring, even though it was meant to be reassuring, that we were being taken care of and protected and stuff. It didn't feel like that.
And Bethan, am I right that you went back to work recently?
I did, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Oh, both of you have gone back to work. But
no, ignore me. Cut me out of it.
I'll just say that again. So, Bethan, am I right that you went back to work recently?
Yeah, but I'm just working from home. But because with the uncertainty kind of thing, I have a problem with seeing a lot of my friends, because I work in A&E, so a lot of my colleagues are obviously my friends and they're in a red zone. So even a lot of my friends I'm quite anxious about seeing, because I'm, who knows who they come into contact with on a daily basis. So that's quite a difficult thing for me to kind of try and juggle, is the mental health side of it and the staying safe. It's trying to find that balance. It's really difficult.
And have you seen many friends or family at all?
I have during the first lockdown, after shielding kind of stopped, and I would social distance outside. But since the new lockdown, I haven't seen anybody yet. But obviously that's only just started. But kind of as the numbers started to come up, I just kind of tailed off seeing people, because so many of my friends are in the health and social care sector. It's just that added risk. And my mom actually, as well, is a community nurse, so she shielded with me for the first shielding, but this time she's still working, but very similar to like what Mike was saying about, you have that routine where it's like everything has to be done before she can kind of come anywhere near me. But the lucky thing is that she's in full PPE, whereas if she was a teacher or something, she obviously wouldn't have that extra layer of kind of protection, really.
Yeah, it's affecting everyone. And sorry, Caroline, you were saying you've gone back to work as well.
Oh, yes, but working remotely, so it's not too stressful, but it's still quite odd.
I think there was something Bethan said there about, balancing your mental health and like the physical risks that we take. And that's been, you know, something we've talked about. I mean, Carmen and I talk about it a lot ourselves, and within the community, it's been talked about quite a lot too. But you know, the impact that lockdown and shielding and being labeled as clinically extremely vulnerable has had on all of us is really tough, isn't it? And I think as time's gone on, as Carmen said at the beginning, you know, you think, right, this will be a couple of months, I can do this, I've done it something similar before, I can lock down and protect myself, and then everything will be fine. And obviously you get to the end of, you know, 3 months or 4 months and we're still in similar situations. There's been a lot more talk about how that's impacted on our mental health, and whether certain risks and some things that maybe we didn't do at the start of lockdown are okay now, because, you know, we need to balance that. And I wondered if anyone else has had any experiences of how they might have done that, or what's
Takeaways. That's what it's
takeaways, yeah. Did you avoid takeaways at the beginning?
Yeah, because you got to have a stranger come and bring you something, and you're not really sure, you know. So you're like, nah, I don't want that person coming near my house, thanks, and touching my food. So we made everything at the beginning, and near the end, it just, especially as it started to ease lockdown, it was kind of like, well, yeah, takeaway. And save ourselves some effort on a Friday and Saturday night, you know. And now that lockdown is back, we're not really sure whether we should do that or not. I guess I'm kind of fortunate because I had COVID at the beginning, and so miraculously I was fine. But I shielded anyway because there are so many other things out there. And I still kind of feel the same way now, even though this lockdown is different. I'll just stay inside. It's safer for me. There's nothing really out there at the moment. But it would be nice to go out and spend some time, you know, in a museum or something like that. That would be really nice.
Yeah.
A day out.
A day out. Yeah, that's a dream, isn't it?
And that's the balance, which is doubly difficult this time, Bethany. You know, for you to come out into remission, and then and not be able to be in contact with people, or have to go straight into shielding, where the balance of, you know, having cancer and the mental health issues that come with it. You know, I had the opportunity where I could engage with Shine and seek help, but people that are coming out of their treatment, or people that are struggling, that are deep in shielding now, and they don't have access to those friends, family services, which you know, which I did. And I think that must be really tough. So you know, it's really, I think that balance is really important, that you know, you try hard to get it, the hardest to get it right in such difficult circumstances.
Yeah, so I did have some contact with Shine. I think I took part on their first virtual, kind of like what would be their weekend away or their week away. So that was really good to have that. And I also had counselling from Macmillan, kind of virtually too. And I actually found that I had a few sessions where I went in and saw the counsellor, and then a few virtual. And I found that actually I got more out of the virtual ones because I was at home in my own environment. I could relax. I was a bit more relaxed, more open, and it didn't feel so formal. So I think, you know, virtual things, there's you know, pluses and minuses, isn't there? You can take different things away from it. But yeah, it is the getting out with friends and going for a meal and stuff like that. That's the biggest thing, I think, that you kind of miss. Like, I think a lot of places are adapting services so that you can still get that support, which is great.
And is anyone else, in terms of like supporting your mental health, is there any, I guess, any what's the word, like, I want to say takeaways again, but so not a physical, you know, eating takeaway, but is there anything that you've maybe, I guess, either struggled with or found really helps during both cancer and COVID for anyone? Jamil, you talked a little bit about kind of anxiety and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I guess I was stage 4 when I was diagnosed, and I've been on that sort of roller coaster for 5 years, and never having achieved remission and relapsed several times. And I don't know, you adopt this kind of personality where you kind of outwardly you shrug it off, but inward you're panicked all the time, or you're concerned about, I don't know, some deadline, whatever it is. It could be something simple like, you need to achieve something for your house, or for your family, or whatever, or work. Or it can be really complex. You're thinking about when is my treatment going to work? Because that frequently was on my mind. And I kind of got Zoom fatigue, because people always ask, how are you? And the people that ask how are you really do mean, how are you? They know your treatment history. They're asking because they really want to know. And it's hard to answer them positively all the time, especially when you're not in that frame of mind. I don't know, you kind of just back away. I think I certainly did. I backed away from almost all social communication, because I felt like I was just going to be really negative, and I didn't really want to pass that on to other people. You know what I mean? So I found that quite hard, but I think I'm working to slowly improve my lack of Zoom fatigue, and even Skype and things like that. So yeah, I think that's probably one of the harder things of COVID. And some of the other things, especially as a man, it's quite hard admitting that you need to go for counselling and things like that. I think I've had, let's say, 40 counselling sessions, and I can say categorically that had I not, I probably wouldn't be sat here now, and I probably wouldn't be as, I'm not going to say I'm a well-balanced person, because that's probably not true, but I wouldn't be able to enjoy things or find things the positive in things. You know what I mean? You get really in that downward spiral, especially after treatment for so long. I don't know, Mike, how do you feel? Have you had any counselling? Was it worthwhile?
Me, yeah. Oh, yes, absolutely. For me, things started to go south rapidly when I went into remission, and it all kind of kicked off really when remission came, and everybody else around me was really, ecstatic and happy.
Yeah.
And I was just like numb, and I couldn't understand why I didn't feel the same way. And so I faked it, and I was like, yeah, everything's happy days, but and looking back, that wasn't right. And things did get pretty bad, because classic blokey blokes, we don't want to speak openly and about our personal problems, because we're blokes, and that's
just to crack on.
Yeah, it's exactly, yeah, just to take a deep breath and crack on. And in my mind, I thought it would work itself out over time, and everything would be fine, and I didn't accept that I wasn't particularly well, and I didn't want to accept that I needed help, and I think if I had accepted that much earlier in that kind of process, I probably would have been able to prevent, some of the stuff which happened, and the sort of downward spiral that I took. And that's why I think the counselling certainly was a massive help. Because if I can just make one more point, I don't want to take up too much time, is that blokes do want to talk, but they want to talk in private to someone that they can trust, as opposed to people down a pub or their mates or something. That's where it has to be somewhere safe, where they feel that they can talk without feeling that they're being judged, if that makes sense. It was for me anyway.
Yeah, no, it does. No, it makes absolute sense, because even as a +1, you get impacted being a bloke. And what I found is that not many blokes want to talk about this kind of stuff. And I'm sure I've had a low level of anxiety over the last 9-10 years. And I had counselling first time round when Mira went through treatment. But it took me nearly 2 years to realise that I had to go and speak to somebody else. And that was actually going to speak to a stranger, because you can say whatever you want. And I've always used exercise as a form to deal with all the other stuff that goes around me. So, I get out and I do stuff. And that's been the biggest impact in COVID, because certain things had to stop because you physically couldn't go. to a class or whatever. And luckily, because I'd taken up cycling 3-4 years ago, I can go out and I can do that on my own. Or I can do it with a friend, do it socially distanced. But the hardest bit is finding someone you can talk to. I think, Jamil, you mentioned this. People ask you how you are. I think they're doing that as a bit of a tick box exercise, because they think it's the right thing that they should be asking you, how are you? Whereas I think I've only really ever had a few genuine friends, and actually probably most of them are the female friends that I have, who actually, no, I'm just asking you, how are you really? How are you dealing with things? Not just that simple question of how are you? And I think a lot of blokes, whether they're really good mates of yours or not, I don't think they want to sit there and have that conversation with you, because they're probably worried about how to react to something that you might say, which is actually, you know what, all this stuff is shit. I don't like it. I'm struggling with it. How to deal with it. And most of your bloke mates will probably walk away from that, whereas you find that odd. Yeah, they will. They'll block your response. And for me, it's actually been probably more some of my really close female friends who really properly ask that question. So that they ask about Mira, but more importantly, how are you as an individual? How are you doing? How are you coping? Because there's a lot of uncertainty. Mira's cancer is incurable. She's still on maintenance chemo. She gets monitored every so often. So every time she's going to an appointment, you're thinking, right, what's going to come off the back of that? Is there more treatment? What's going to happen? You don't know how long you've got. And I think for blokes, it's finding that right avenue to have those conversations to keep your mental health and stability. And you've got to keep strong. Because like I said, everyone expects a bloke to be strong, both mentally and physically, but actually it's not that simple.
We have different layers. We have
we're like onions, right? You've got to peel.
Yeah. Well, my counsellor said it was like a Russian doll. You have different layers for different people, work colleagues, friends, family, etc. But then, and I found who gets to see the centre, who gets to see the little one.
Yes.
You know, and it's generally those that are closest to you. But yeah, I get that.
I think it's one of the things that you've all kind of touched on there is that like the pressure to be positive. And I think sometimes that, that's like when somebody asks you how you are when they're not really that interested, like your answer is always, yeah, fine, thanks. Like whatever's going on. I think, I've been in situations where you're absolutely, completely not fine, but your response will always be that, won't it? Because it's, that the question is it doesn't really mean how are you, it's just a greeting. And I think I think Mike, you mentioned that kind of like the pressure to be positive, and I think it's labeled toxic positivity nowadays.
Yeah.
But it's everyone around us expects us to be, oh, this is brilliant news, like I'm fine now, everything's okay, and I can forget about
strong
cancer.
And you're fighting the fight. Yeah, hang in there, you're doing great.
And that's just not the experience for a lot of people, isn't it? But if people are expecting you to be, oh, you've done so well, you're amazing, you can't then respond with well, actually, I feel really crappy and this situation is horrible and my life's a bit crap at the minute. That's it makes it much more difficult, doesn't it?
I've had people who expect that of you, and when your response is negative, the first thing they say is usually something that you wouldn't expect from that type of person. That they'd say something like, you should be thankful that you're still here, or something akin to that. It might not be exactly that, and that's when you're like, and so you just rather not say anything. That's personally what I just withdraw. There's no point.
I get that.
I didn't tell anyone that I
don't know. Sorry.
No, you go.
I just said people always look for the silver lining, and that's sometimes quite difficult, because sometimes you need someone to be like to listen, or just to go, yeah, that is really crap.
Yeah.
And that's,
it's difficult, isn't it? 'Cause I think people think that they're helping by saying things like, I don't know, oh, you just need to think positive, or think about the good things that are happening. And sometimes in therapy, for example, it might be that something that comes up where it can be really beneficial to try and find the things that you're grateful for in life. But actually some days you just want to be able to say, this is rubbish, and have someone go, yeah, it sounds rubbish.
I think it's okay to have, and I say this quite a lot, I think it's okay to have a shit day. Yeah. You can have one of those. You'll have to have that. And, COVID compounds everything. I don't know for you guys, but for us, nothing's changed, regardless of when we came out of lockdown and when we go back into lockdown. Everything has stayed the same. Nothing has changed. Only difference is that Rohan goes to school. That is it. And it's okay to have a crappy day. And that's not, I'm going to do nothing. And in one way, Rohan going back to school has been a bit of a blessing in disguise, because you're not all three stuck at home the whole time. And for the first time yesterday, Mira and I had the whole day to go out and do stuff because the weather was nice and we didn't have to worry about Rohan until whatever, and we could just do whatever. But you're right, it's okay to have a crap day, and people got to accept that you will have crappy days. You can't be a winner all the time.
No, that's right.
At all. This is a long journey.
Do you find yourself pressuring yourselves on those days where you feel bad and you know you probably shouldn't do anything, but you're sat there thinking, my life is crimped enough? Because I get that when I'm having a really bad day, like in the last 5-6 weeks, I've been really sick, and it grinds you down. You know what I mean? You don't feel well, and you've got loads of stuff to do. I've got, I work from home. It's really hard to concentrate at work when you feel awful. And then on your weekends, you're just sort of in a heap on the sofa, and I find myself pressuring myself to try and do things, or motivate myself to go and do something inspirational, or whatever you want to call it, right? But I just can't. And then I don't reap the benefit of the relaxation at that point. I guess maybe I find it really hard to switch off. Maybe it's that.
And I think that then sounds like the kind of guilt of having those days where you're, if in any situation where whether you've got a stage 4 diagnosis or not, when you've heard the words you've got cancer, the thing is that you're aware that your time might be limited or could be. Yeah. And so then if you have a day where, in other situations you might be, I'm just going to have a duvet day today. I feel like crap. I'm going to watch Netflix. I'm going to sit on the sofa and I'm going to get a takeaway. But actually, then you're putting yourself under pressure to say, well, that's a waste. I should be doing something amazing. I should be, an inspirational cancer patient to, go climb a mountain or something, or run a marathon. And I think, maybe COVID's given us an excuse not to do that this year, but it's, that feeling of guilt is that you're not making the most of what time you have is something that comes up quite a lot, isn't it, that people talk
Caroline,
about.
I'm wondering, how has that been for you? Because I know before lockdown, you were doing an incredible amount of traveling, and your diagnosis has also sort of been up and down. So have you kind of changed things, or I don't know, was all the traveling great before and you're happy to have a bit of a break, or how has that felt?
So I guess at the beginning there's only one form of treatment for my disease that's allowed per NICE guidelines. So I had that, and then it didn't work. And then so at the beginning of 19, I had a few months where I obviously had no treatment, and I was put forward for a clinical trial, but we had a bit of a gap between my immunotherapy treatment and then starting the targeted drug on the trial. And when I was given the targeted drug, I was told this will hopefully give you about 6 months of stability. That's what we can hope for, and then we'll look for another trial. So I had this kind of crazy, full-on 2019 where I was, like you said, I was traveling everywhere. I did some really crazy stuff, and I was on a phase 2 clinical trial, and I was taking my drugs into these random places and all unlabeled because it's all unlicensed. It felt very kind of dramatic and bold and wacky, and because I didn't think I had 6 months to live, but I thought, okay, well, I don't know how much longer I'm going to have a good life to live. So I really want to fit in all of those experiences. And then in December last year, I got clear scan results out of the blue. Well, the tumours had been decreasing for a while, but nobody had expected it to bring me to no evidence of disease. And I found it so distressing. I didn't tell anyone, because I didn't want people to think it was over. So because it didn't, we've talked about the kind of mental journey, it will never be over for me because it's incurable. And I'm still on the treatment now, and nobody knows when it's going to end, because it was supposed to have ended months ago. So I didn't tell anyone. And then when I did start telling people, I'd say the tumors in my lungs have gone, and just hope that they remembered that there were no tumors anywhere else to begin with. It was just lung metastasis. And so then actually when COVID hit, I was so kind of ill at ease with the fact that I suddenly had no evidence of disease. I hadn't really made sort of big celebratory plans or big plans for 2020, because just the fact that I was suddenly fine was so unbelievable to me. I didn't know what to do. So yeah, so I think that this year, actually, although I've been stuck at home, and although we have actually been on we managed to get on a trip right as lockdown began, and then we were away for a couple of days in September. So I've had a bit of kind of travel and stuff. But actually, this year has been a blessing, because I suppose it gave me, at the start of lockdown, although it was incredibly stressful, it gave me a lot of time to sit in a room by myself and think about everything I'd been through, which I don't think is necessarily very healthy. But it was incredibly helpful. And I started, and I hadn't really been very open about my diagnosis and stuff, because it's complicated and people have so many misconceptions about melanoma, and I have this weird form again. So it was on my genitals. So it was so personal. I couldn't really address it. But then to have this kind of time in lockdown where I could just sit down and think, whoa, all of that has happened to me and I'm still here, was really beneficial. And that's when I started writing about it and blogging about it, because I kind of wanted to get like a definitive version of my story out there. And then as I've gone back to work recently, it's been really helpful to say, okay, well, I did all of that thinking and that really tough stuff, and I'm by no means over it, because I'm in treatment and just trying to live somehow. But it was nice to think, okay, well, I've got this out there now, and there's a clear story, and I'm really happy to talk about it in a way that I wasn't before. That was a very long answer.
No, that's great.
And short question.
No, that brings us to our final question for the panel, because we're almost out of time. This has just flown by like it always does. Yeah. I feel like we could talk for hours. But I guess one of the things that you just mentioned was that, writing your blog and blogging has really helped you. And I'm just wondering if we could maybe, as a final word to everybody, go around and just find out what else has helped everyone else, because you never know where you might find a nugget of inspiration from somebody. So Mike, is there anything that you could point to that's really helped you through cancer and COVID?
It's been two things, really. I think the most important change for me, when I was rebuilding my life from the position I got myself into, it was engaging with Shine and actually finding somebody and other people that were experiencing the same things as me and feeling the same things as me, because it was so isolating. Nobody understood, nobody got it. Everybody thought, well, you're fine now, aren't you? You're in remission. And so being able to talk to people and go, yeah, I know how that feels. I get that. And so that was I say it was life changing in the cliche word journey since with Shine has really made that. But it's funny, Caroline, you say you've been writing your blogs. I've just started writing kind of everything down, because so much has happened over this last 18 months, 2 years, that I kind of want to capture it. And although it takes you back to those areas where are difficult to think about and really, because you're having to relive all those things when you put it down on paper. But actually it's quite therapeutic, cathartic, and then once you've got it down on paper, it's kind of you've got it out of your head, and so that is something which I've never done before, and I've done, I did everything else previously, the counselling, and I still do, and exercise, and all those things together. But that's a new thing, writing something down, everything down. Maybe it'll be something for my children to read later on, when I'm not here. But that's been a real help.
That's great. Thanks, Mike.
And we didn't pay you to say that about Shine, did we?
No.
Free t-shirts.
The check's in the post.
Yeah.
Bethan, what about you?
I think mine's quite similar to Mike, really. I live in quite a rural place with a very elderly population. So when I was treated at hospital, there were no other young people. I had most of my treatments as an inpatient, so I didn't meet anybody going through treatment who I could kind of relate to. So I think you know, taking part in things like Shine and being able to even virtually kind of meet people and know that they feel a lot of the same things that I do, you know, and actually it's completely normal to feel a lot of those things. That's been a massive help to me. And I also just have like an Instagram, which I just kind of like write down things every now and again to get it off my chest, and I find that quite therapeutic and helpful, and also a way of letting people know how you feel without them having to ask. Sometimes they can just have a look and they know, oh, you know, something positive's happened or something negative's happened. So yeah, I found that quite useful.
Yeah, that's great. And I think a lot of people, you know, it's about finding that right outlet, isn't it? Something that works for you, whether it's Instagram, whether it's a blog, whether it's a journal. It's just something that allows you to kind of express how you're feeling, and then you get a choice about whether or not you want to share it, which is, yeah, really great. Thank you. Jamil, what about you?
So I think probably a similar theme, writing or blogging or the counselling, because I think those are they're kind of packed together. Those things that was invaluable. I'll be honest, and I would recommend that anyone take up counselling. It should be available to all of us, certainly free anyway, either via Macmillan or via the hospital that you get your treatment from. That certainly was for me. And I think the other thing, and I might be on my own on this one, but I had a brutally rigid regime throughout the 5 years of my treatment. So I always got up at the same time, 7:30 every morning. And no matter how I felt, I got up and, you know, you do your morning stuff and you go and sit down however you felt. And I had a routine where if it wasn't work when I was working, there was something I filled the time with. And it allowed me to not spend my time thinking about cancer and how I felt. And I could just focus on something that I was doing. So just having a really rigid routine was really helpful, I think.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and I mean, again, it's what works for you, isn't it? Because some people actually really benefit from that kind of thing. I am the worst person in the world for having a routine. I will go to bed every night going, tomorrow I'll get up at 6 to go for a run. And have I ever done it? No. But I think a lot of it is about experimenting, right? So you might try putting stuff on Instagram. Maybe that doesn't feel quite right. So then you try blogging, or, you know, maybe you think, actually, you know, I'm going to get up at 7:30 every morning and make my bed, and that works, and that gives me some structure, and that's really helpful. So it's about experimenting and kind of, you know, trying things and getting to the point where you say, yeah, okay, this one works and the other one didn't, so I'm not going to do it. But that's great. Thanks, Jamil. Amit, what about you?
I think one of the things that we've realized, or I realized, it's okay to have a slower pace of life. You don't have to do everything. And I think a lot of people try and jam pack a whole load of things in. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I want to do this, I want to see these people. And I think as a family, I'm a social person. I like being out and about and doing lots of different things, but actually it's quite nice to have that slower pace of life sometimes. I think one thing, finding people that you know you can talk to and you can trust and have that easy conversations, that makes a big difference, because you can't always get to see a counsellor, do that all the time, but it's fine as people. But for me, the most important thing is being the exercise that I do and trying to stick to that routine during Mira's treatment, during COVID, and getting out and doing something, because I've realized that if I can go a week or two without even going for a 15-minute walk, it's not good for my mental health, and then that has an impact on my family. So in terms of exercise, you don't have to do what everybody else does. Just find out what works for you, and then just get out there and do it. And I find that as a good way to clear my head. But yeah, those are probably 3 things for me.
Oh, those are all great. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone for joining us, because it's been great. And honestly, I feel like we could have probably talked all day if we had more time. So we're going to wrap this up now, and everyone is going to join us live once this video ends. And then if you are just dipping into Shine Connect for the first time at the moment, please make sure to check out all the other stuff that we've got on today, tomorrow, and for the rest of the week. And we'll see you soon.